Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we're talking about what happened to Link's house in Tears of the Kingdom. So Link had a house from a side quest in Hateno Village in Breath of the Wild, and a lot of things transpired between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So people are questioning what exactly happened. Does Link still have the house? Is he sharing it with Zelda? Or did he give the house away to Zelda? Or did Zelda steal it away from Link? There's a lot of possibilities here. Now I'm going to point out there's not going to be any real spoilers in this video, it's just talking about the circumstances surrounding Link's house and what actually happened to it. And this video is actually meant to be a bit of a follow-up to a video I did a few days ago that was speaking on the relationship between Link and Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom. And in this video, it was meant to be a discussion video, it's a 16-minute video, where I bring up several points from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that I think have implications for what their relationship actually is. But in truth, I could have brought up even more details from Breath of the Wild and even more details from Tears of the Kingdom, but it would have been a much longer video. But one point I brought up in particular was a situation regarding Link's house. I made the assumption, based off from what I've seen, that Link and Zelda are living together between the events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and many people provided counter-arguments to this idea. So I've taken these comments to heart, I've considered them, I've looked at the possibilities, and I've also considered some of the details that I didn't bring up in that prior video, and I'm now going to consider what's actually happened. Are Link and Zelda staying together? Did Link just give away the house to Zelda, or did Zelda somehow steal it? Well, that's what we're talking about today. But before we go further, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, it just might be possible. So there's a number of details that I'm now factoring into this situation that have not been brought up before, but before we get to those, let me first talk about why I initially believed that Link and Zelda are living together in the house in Hateno, and then we'll get to the counter-argument, and then I'll get to some of the new details. So firstly, the house in Hateno Village, in Breath of the Wild, when you go there, you come to discover that it's about to be taken down, and when you ask around, it's said that the house has been long abandoned. The people around don't know who lives in that house, suggesting it's been a very long time, longer than potentially the lifespans of the people living in that village. And it's said that the person who once lived there went off to Hyrule Castle to serve. So what's important about this is that Hyrule Castle was effectively ruined during the Calamity, so no one will be going to serve Hyrule Castle in the 100 years that transpired between the Calamity and the events of Breath of the Wild. Meaning that whoever abandoned this house was living in that time, which could have been Link, and Link is someone that went to serve the castle. And because of the Calamity, he was not able to send word of his whereabouts and what happened to him. People thought he was dead. He was in the Shrine of Resurrection for 100 years. So many people think that this implies that the abandoned house in Hateno Village was once Link's. But regardless of whether or not it was Link's, there's a side quest where Link can make it his own in the events of Breath of the Wild as you play. So you can come to own the house, and you can put your own belongings in there. So, in the events of Tears of the Kingdom, we know that Link and Zelda are traveling alongside of each other to restore Hyrule. That's their goal in the final cutscene in Breath of the Wild. So in Tears of the Kingdom, we come to discover that this is exactly what was going on. Link and Zelda were working together to help restore Hyrule. And when you go to Hateno Village, you'll come to this house, and there's no sign suggesting it's Link's house, but there's also no text that pops up that says it's Link's house or Zelda's house. But when you go inside of the house, the furniture has been rearranged, some of the things that you might have left up in Breath of the Wild are no longer there. Some of the things, there's something still there, and we'll get to that. But you'll find there's one bed with one pillow, maybe suggesting that only one person is staying there, and you see Zelda's diary. And in Zelda's diary, she talks about how she's been staying in a Hateno, they're trying to build a school, and how she had a secret study built so she can study and work in private. So, given that this used to be Link's house, and that Zelda's now staying here, and that Link and Zelda are working together, and that there's a lot of romantic implications in Breath of the Wild in Tears of the Kingdom, and that she had an area built so she can work privately, I thought that this is all put together to suggest that Link and Zelda have been living together. They share one bed, further supporting the idea that they are in some type of romantic relationship. But people have had counter-arguments to this. So something that people have brought up is that in Hateno Village, beyond just Simon, the secret professor, no one recognizes Link. And if Link has been living in this house for years during these current times, they should recognize him. And also, every day, the wife of the mayor visits the house to clean the house. And when you talk to her, she talks about how the children visit the house all the time after school. And this would suggest that potentially the reason why Zelda had that private study is so she could study in this well area where she won't be distracted by the kids visiting her house. So that's why she would have it. Not so much that Link is staying with her and that's why she wants a private place. It's entirely possible that Link would just give the house to Zelda. Or maybe Zelda stole the house. Now, I don't think Zelda stole the house. She's not that kind of person. It's Link's house. It's that simple. But another possibility is that maybe she bought the house because Link never owned it. Some have considered that maybe because it was simply a side quest, that it's not canon and therefore it never happened. But I don't agree. Firstly, there are several points throughout Tears of the Kingdom that pay homage and acknowledge the history of Breath of the Wild. In the school, they teach on the Calamity. Near Hyrule Castle, where Castletown used to be, there is a spot where Zelda has a monument to those that were lost during the Calamity. But those are just the main plot lines. What about some of the side quests? Well, what about Tarrytown? That entire town that is a big town in Tears of the Kingdom is just a side quest in Breath of the Wild. And that side quest would be closely tied to the house in Hateno Village because you need to buy the house so you can start the Tarrytown side quest. So I don't think that Tears of the Kingdom has retconned out the house because it was just a side quest. I don't think that's the case. And in fact, if you played the DLC for Breath of the Wild, including the Champions Ballad, and you completed it, you get this picture of the champions alongside Link and Zelda all together. They take a nice little picture, and you can put up this picture in your house in Breath of the Wild. And if you do so and you have this memory saved over, when you play Tears of the Kingdom, that picture is still there. So a belonging of Link's is still inside that house. So the continuity of Tears of the Kingdom, I think, is the same as Breath of the Wild, and it assumes you did do all the side quests. But then you might ask, why are there some characters, or many characters, that don't recognize who Link is? Well, something I've noticed throughout my adventures in Hyrule of Tears of the Kingdom is that there are people who do recognize Link. But these are people that are closer to Hyrule Castle. These are people that are taking on a more active role with the restoration of Hyrule or figuring out what's going on with the upheaval, or basically more closely tied to the main story of the game. If they aren't closely tied to the main story of the game, then they're not going to recognize Link. This would mean the random people in the Gerudo Village, the random people in Lurelin Village. They're not going to recognize Link, and they don't. And this logic, I think, also applies to Hateno Village. There's not really much about Hateno Village that is pertinent to the main story of the game. Except for Simon, who works with Purah, or has worked with Purah, and he does recognize Link. So my take was that the reason why a whole bunch of people don't recognize Link is simply because there's a lot of NPCs, and some people who play this game will be coming into Tears of the Kingdom as their first game, and they may not have necessarily played Breath of the Wild. They want this game to stand on its own if people choose to play it in that way. So that's why most of the NPCs in the game don't recognize Link. It's not hinting at that Link hasn't been around in Hateno Village. And something else I'll point out is that when you have a horse and you go into a village, you're not allowed to gallop, you can only trot. And when you go to Hateno Village, that still applies, but once you start to venture off to the side towards Link's house, there's a point where you can start to gallop. So, I think this implies that where Link's house is, or Zelda's house is, or maybe both their houses, it's on the outskirts. So it's not considered to be the main part of the town. So potentially someone could be living there and they may not be recognized. But all the kids from the school visit the house after school every day. Why wouldn't they recognize Link? I think in part it goes back to what I was saying before. These NPCs are not important to the main story. And while it may be the case that the kids may visit after school all the time, and that may make sense for Zelda to go escape to study, would she really leave a whole bunch of kids unattended in her house every day? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, if there's an adult that follows, sure, but that's not made clear that there's always an adult when the kids come over. And this would be in the middle of the day after school, not in the morning, not even necessarily in the evening, because the kids are going to go to bed. In fact, all the kids, once night strikes, they go to bed. They go into their houses at least. So there's plenty of times in the day where Zelda could study in private. She could also just close the door. The kids aren't visiting the house when she's not away, and they're very playful kids that explore around all the time. So I don't think this point suggests that her private well area is just because of the kids to hide away from them. I think it could still imply that there may be someone else who lives with her that she wants to do things privately from, like study and perhaps do some things for him that she doesn't want him to know about. For example, in Zelda's second diary, not the one she has in the house, but the one she has in her secret study area in the well, she talks about how she has created a new tunic for Link as a thank you gift because Link has been working by her side throughout all of this restoration effort. So she has surprises for Link, she makes gifts for Link, and she's talking about it in a place that's private that not even Link would go, supporting the idea that she would be studying in this area to hide away from Link during certain periods of the day, potentially. And also, there's a chest there where you can find a lock of Link's hair. Why would Zelda have this? It's peculiar to me. Now, going back to the one bed thing, there's also only one pillow, so maybe only one person sleeps on that bed, but most of the beds in Tears of the Kingdom only have one pillow. I don't think this necessarily implies that they cannot be sleeping together. It is just a video game. Not every detail is going to be made so crystal clear. And what's interesting though is that there's only 2 beds in the game that Link can go to and sleep freely without having to pay. That's Link's house, that's also now Zelda's house in Hateno Village, and a random cabin in Fort Hateno. Now you might think, oh, okay, well, while it may be the case that Link has been working with Zelda side by side throughout this entire restoration effort, maybe he's simply staying elsewhere. And that would make sense. Link would need somewhere fairly nearby to stay if he's going to be working alongside of her throughout this entire restoration effort. But there's only 2 places where he could possibly be staying at: Hateno Village in his house, or this cabin. Except here's the problem with the cabin. The cabin isn't Link's cabin. The cabin is someone else, and they've given permission for anyone who comes by to sleep or stay there because they've left the cabin indefinitely to study the events of the upheaval. Before the upheaval, they were staying here. In other words, this is not a house that Link could have been staying at, and there's only one place Link could have been staying at. And I actually took the time to start off from the path of Kakariko Village that goes straight to Hateno Village. They're the closest towns in terms of paths, and I rode a horse, a pony, one of the fastest horses, and I maintained full gallop, not using the sprints, but full gallop the entire time, which realistically, they would probably rest at some point and just be trotting, but the entire time, and that takes more than 4.5 hours in game time. So would Link really be working with Zelda side by side every day and be traveling multiple hours just to get to her every day there and back? No, it's not realistic. And if we're going to be so detailed to think that, oh, well, if there are all these villagers that don't recognize Link, then we should also consider this realistic aspect of, well, where Link would stay. And the place that makes the most sense is Link's house. So I think he's just staying there. He can sleep there, Zelda can sleep there, it's their place. She has a private study, and it's that simple. And the reason why people don't recognize Link is because none of the characters that are not pertinent to the main story recognize Link. And that's it. Now you could argue that because the house is on the outskirts, and that because Link is not one that talks, and that maybe he's a busy person and doesn't show up during the day most of the time, he's out doing different things, that people wouldn't see him. And it's that simple. He's not someone who's very social. And you could also consider that because he doesn't have his lock of hair, his hair looks longer, and because of the injury to his arm, he looks like a different person. Not everyone recognizes Link immediately, by the way, so it's possible that if people don't know Link well, and he's had a bit of a transformation because of the events of Ganondorf and the upheaval, he's just not going to get recognized. So because Link doesn't have anywhere else to stay, because Link is not a very talkative person and has had a visual transformation, because Link can still sleep in that bed, because some of Link's belongings are still there, because Zelda has a private study that has a lock for Link's hair and she hides away secrets from him there, implying that she does use it to hide away from him, I do think they are staying together. But that is my interpretation of what's going on. I think they're staying together because they care about each other and they're working together to restore Hyrule. Now, are they married? Potentially. That could have happened off screen. We don't know. And it should also be noted that because the Kingdom of Hyrule is no more, the last king is now passed away, that the politics that might get in the way of Link and Zelda staying together aren't really the case anymore. Also, why couldn't Impa or Purah or Paya, people who are Sheikah who are known to help out the royal family, why didn't they offer up a place for Zelda to stay? I think it's because Link and Zelda are in a relationship. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.